I'm Manny London. For those of you who don't know, I am the Dean of the College of Business, and I want to welcome you here. And our Provost, Michael Bernstein, will be introducing the program. This is a Provost lecture, which means that it is supported by the Provost's office, and we're grateful for that support. I just want to thank a few people who were also sponsors and received a program, and they are noted in the program. Fred Braun of Brookhaven IDA, excuse me, Joe Campolo of Campolo Middleton McCormick, and we'll be hearing from Joe in a minute. Matt Burke of Serini Associates, Greg Shore of Protegrity Advisors, Keith Miller of the Suffolk Federal Credit Union, Don Zier, our guest of honor from Nutrisystem, of course, and Trivity. Did I get that right? Tivity, okay. And the Entrepreneur's Edge Committee members, Maria Fry, Joe Barry, Matt Colson, and Marie McCallion. I thank them very much for helping to organize this activity. And thanks, too, to our Leaders Council, Gary Fitlin, who chairs that council, Ed Fabian, and Bruce Newman, and Bruce, who is the architect and initial stimulus for the Entrepreneur's Edge series. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our Provost, Michael Bernstein.
Thank you, Manny. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome all the students, faculty, and staff colleagues and community members who are here this evening. We're delighted you're here for the Entrepreneur's Edge series and this Provost lecture. Let me say a few words about the series and about our guests this evening. The Entrepreneur's Edge series aims to highlight the College of Business's commitment to entrepreneurship and innovation. And this series is spearheaded by Bruce Newman, the CEO of Protegrity, and other business executives and corporate sponsors who are listed in your program. The series highlights the knowledge and experiences of major entrepreneurs and executives here on Long Island and throughout the New York metropolitan region. Our College of Business here at Stony Brook has experienced major growth during the last 7 years or so. One of our key goals is to contribute to the economic development here on the island. Our college students work with startups in the business incubators on campus and throughout the region, led in particular by Professors Garrett Wolf and Richard Chan in their popular courses on technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And also, students not only in the college but across our campus are invited to work in the Innovation Lab in Harriman, which is led by David Ecker, the Director of Research Technologies in the Department of Information Systems. This lab in Harriman offers workshops. It provides 3D printers, laser cutters, computer visualization equipment, and other technologies to support our students' work on new products and services. Our program tonight explores the experiences of a major entrepreneur and business leader, Dawn Zier. She will be interviewed by Joe Campolo, a member of the Stony Brook class of 1994. Let me say a few words about Joe, then I'll get on to Dawn. Joe is the chairman of Protegrity Advisors. He's the managing partner of Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick, which is a leading law firm with offices in Westbury, Ronkonkoma, and Bridgehampton here on the island. Joe has vast experience in the M&A space from all sides of the table. I think you would agree with that. Lawyer, client, advisor. He has also spearheaded some of the most important initiatives in recent years to grow the regional economy here in southeastern New York. As chairman of the board of directors of the Hauppauge Industrial Association of Long Island, Joe's been the driving force between that association's study of the economic impact of the Hauppauge Industrial Park, which is the largest industrial park in the nation after Silicon Valley. CMM, Joe's firm, is well known for its philanthropic efforts, and Joe and CMM are particularly active in the Stony Brook University community, for which we are very, very grateful. Joe is a past president of the Alumni Association. He serves on the advisory board of the Stoller Center right next door and has served as a lecturer in our MBA program. CMM recently made a $450,000 gift to the Stoller Center, solidifying the firm's dedication to the fine arts. CMM is also a major supporter of our intercollegiate athletics program. So we're proud and excited to welcome Joe here tonight, so let's give him one more round of applause. Thank you, Joe. So now let me talk about Dawn Zier. Dawn is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Tivity Health Incorporated. She was formerly the President and Chief Executive Officer of Nutrisystem prior to the company's acquisition by Tivity earlier this month. As Nutrisystem's CEO from November 2012 through to this month, Dawn championed a strategic vision centered on a multi-brand and multi-channel approach to capturing an ever-increasing and significant share of the weight loss market and expanding into the broader health and wellness space itself. She led an ambitious 4-point turnaround and growth plan, enhancing the company's integrated e-commerce and general marketing capabilities, acquiring the South Beach diet brand, and introducing several new product lines, including a breakthrough digital weight loss tool and an industry-first retail and DNA offerings. During Dawn's tenure, revenues close to doubled, profits quintupled. This turnaround and growth story has been widely covered by many media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And Nutrisystem was described as on fire, that's in the good sense, by the Philadelphia Business Journal, and it was named one of Fortune's top 100 fastest growing companies last year. Dawn has a unique background, combines a deep understanding of market trends and of marketing. She has a trained engineer's passion for precision and data analytics and years of business leadership, as I've just shared with you. Prior to her time at Nutrisystem, she had held numerous other leadership positions at the Reader's Digest Association. She was responsible for nearly $1 billion of revenue there and thousands of employees across Europe, the Asia-Pacific region, and Latin America. Dawn has also held positions at AT&T and Chase Manhattan Bank. A strong proponent of a facts-based culture that drives focus on priorities, accountability, customer centricity, and teamwork, Dawn's distinct management philosophy and approach has earned her multiple business awards. It's been chronicled in major publications, including, again, the Journal, the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer. Dawn was named the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year last year and was recognized by Institutional Investor as one of the best CEOs nationwide. In addition to being a member of Tivity's board, Dawn serves on the boards of the Hain Celestial Group and Spirit Airlines. Over the years, she's served on boards and has chaired committees for multiple philanthropies as well, including the American Diabetes Association and the American Heart Association. Dawn's also a sought-after speaker and expert. She regularly comments mostly on radio in major markets throughout the U.S. and contributes in writing to Fortune, the Huffington Post, the Philadelphia Business Journal. Dawn received a Master of Science degree in electrical engineering and in computer science, as well as an MBA from MIT. She earned a Bachelor of Science in electrical engineering and computer science from Stony Brook. She currently enjoys guest lecturing at leading universities, including our own. So please join me in welcoming Dawn Zier and Joe Campolo.
Thanks, Michael, and welcome everybody. This is I believe our 4th year of the Entrepreneur's Edge, but it's the first year that we have a woman CEO that's sitting in this seat for us to interview. So let's give her a round of applause. And it's also the second time that we've had a Stony Brook alum. So not everybody's been a Stony Brook alum. And there's just so much to talk about with you that I don't know how we're going to get it all done. Because I can tell you it was 25 years ago that I graduated from Stony Brook after having served in the Marine Corps. And Stony Brook has transformed so much over 25 years, as I'm sure you know being back here. And for the students here tonight, this is such a terrific opportunity, and we're so grateful to the Provost for sponsoring and hosting these. You know, we learn by each other's stories. That's how human beings learn, by telling stories. And tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to hear a story of an amazing woman, an amazing business person who's just accomplished so much that every one of these students sitting in this audience right now, I know because I was there one day, is saying, well, how did she get from here to there? And tonight we're going to explore that a little bit. But the first thing I really want to talk to you about, because we are here, they're business students, is what the last month has been like. So I just learned, and you're very good at keeping secrets because we've talked about things, and then they said she's not with Nutrisystem anymore. So let's talk a little bit about that process, right? And then we're going to work how you got to here today.
So as a public company CEO, you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders to do what's best for the company. So back in September, I was in my kitchen and I got a phone call from a CEO that I did not know, or a company I never heard of. So the phone rang and it was the CEO of Tivity Health, and he said, hey, we're interested in exploring a partnership. I'm like, what do you mean by partnership? He said, well, actually, we're interested in potentially acquiring the company. So I said, okay. So, we had been a company, we, as shared earlier, we had doubled our revenue, we had quintupled in profits, and Tivity was looking for a strategy to really expand more into health and wellness. They were a fitness provider. With Silver Sneakers was their flagship brand. We have Nutrisystem and South Beach Diet. So from then on in began a very robust dialogue where you have to work with the board. There's a lot of SEC regulations around it. And lo and behold, December 7th, after many fits and starts, because one of the things I learned as I was going through this process with our bankers is that time is not your friend in any of these deals. You want to move quick, you want to get it done, and you have to do what's right for the shareholders. So on December 5th, I thought nothing was happening. The deal had gone up and down. On December 7th, I was in Florida with my family on vacation. On December 8th, I was on a plane back to New York signing a deal. So is the life of a CEO. So we announced the intended merger was announced on December 9th, and it just closed on March 8th. So now Nutrisystem is a part of the Tivity family, and I'm responsible for the revenue across both the Nutrisystem side of the business as well as the Tivity Health, which is more in the healthcare arena. So new chapters, and we'll talk about that a little later as we talk about embracing change and how doors open when other doors shut.
Yeah, and that's so terrific. So I can remember when I was in law school, that story would be the equivalent of someone who had just gone through a Supreme Court nomination process and had been landed on the court. Because for MBA students and business students in general, that's like the holy grail to go through that sort of
So turn around, grow, and then sell. It's kind of the whole enchilada.
The whole enchilada is there. So now we're going to start, and we're going to bring you back to when you were in Stony Brook, right? And so the first thing was MIT. So I'm curious, because I'm sure a lot of students here today, so I don't know, but I know in 1986, which is when I think you graduated, there wasn't a predominant female population in law schools. And you went to MIT and you got your MBA at MIT, is that correct? And so what was that like? Was it rare for a woman? Was it exciting? How was the culture there?
Well, I would say, I went to Stony Brook first. So I went to Stony Brook as an undergrad, and I actually grew up with two brothers. So and decided to study engineering. So I was very accustomed to being in a male environment. So from Stony Brook, going to MIT, which was even more of a male-oriented environment. But one of the things that I believe in, and for all you females out there, is as you go through business, don't wear your gender identity as a badge. I think that when I think of myself as being a CEO, only 6% to 10% of CEOs are females. And so I really don't want to just limit myself to talking to other female CEOs. I often get asked to speak at female-oriented events. I get female awards. I get female this, female that, and it's all great. It's all such an honor. But I much prefer environments like this where we're in a broader arena of people, because it's more interesting. So I encourage the young women out there, as they go through your careers, don't identify yourself by your gender. Identify yourself by your best person.
Yeah, that's great. And for full disclosure, as we were talking earlier, I went to high school and was friends with one of your brothers. That it's amazing what a small world it is. So what did Stony Brook do to help you? So what did Stony Brook do to help you down this path?
So I credit Stony Brook with teaching me how to think. And I went to Stony Brook. I was an electrical engineering student, and I came with I studied electrical engineering because I wanted to have a job when I graduated, and that pretty much would shore it up. And I liked math. So, but what I learned very quickly after I graduated Stony Brook is that I really didn't love being an engineer. And we'll talk more about that later, how, you know, your career is never a straight line. But what I did learn from Stony Brook was how to, from my experience as electrical engineer training as well as computer science, what I learned is how to take complex problems, break them down into modules, much like a computer scientist would, and then build them back up as you solve. And I've taken that life lesson, that training that I learned from Stony Brook with me in every role that I've had, and I think it's been even more critical as a CEO, because as a CEO, you're faced with daunting problems, and or you know, that you can turn into opportunities, but it really comes down to knowing how to identify, you know, compartmentalize a problem so it doesn't seem so big, solving, and then building up into a solution. And I really credit Stony Brook for teaching me how to think. No matter what path I've taken, it's what I constantly come back to. So I'm very grateful to the university for that. Learned that at Stony Brook, not MIT.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Because when we were talking, as we met and we were talking about tonight in the questions, the word checklist you use, right? And one of the things that I am is a super checklist geek as well, because you have to break it down. So talk about your use of checklists and how that all helps.
Well, you know, I think when I came to Nutrisystem, what I realized was that the culture wasn't in place, and Nutrisystem is an e-commerce based company, but nobody was problem solving or thinking through things in an analytical way. So what I tried to institute was what I call a fact-based culture, which, you know, if you're in a society of data, as we all are, there are lots of facts out there, and it really is how you compartmentalize them and then get out the meaningful insights from all the data. So my compartmentalization, or my checklist, really focused around a phrase I coined at Nutrisystem, which was the facts-based culture, just the facts, which stands for facts, but then it stands for focus, F for focus, A for accountability, C customer-centric, T teamwork, and S solution-based. And that really is a mantra that we have throughout the whole company, and really is the operating principles of the company. So the checklist really is make sure you have the data, make sure you analyze it. Data is black and white, but decisions have a lot of gray in them, so make sure you then take those human insights and drive results from that.
Right, so growing up here on Long Island, you know, and now you're a preeminent business leader. Is that something that you feel was always instilled in you at home? Is it something you learned during the course of your career? How do you feel your leadership skills have blossomed?
So my parents, my mom, who is a Stony Brook alumni who went back later in life to school, really felt education was so important. And, you know, for me growing up, it wasn't, you know, am I going to college? It's where do you want to go to college? And I came from a modest upbringing, you know, maybe middle class, but, you know, as it was really what my parents instilled in me was to be your personal best. It wasn't to be better than you or you or you. It was to be the best that I could personally be, and that's something that I embraced and was instilled in me. And I think I've instilled that in my children as well. So my goal as a child was never to become, you know, I never thought of myself as a leader, but what I did think of myself as is somebody that, because my parents instilled it in me, somebody that could do whatever I wanted if I worked hard enough. And for one brief moment in time, I thought, wow, maybe I'd like to be president. Not a good idea. So you know, too much stress with that. So, but as I went through and opportunities opened the door, I think leadership is really a modeled behavior. So you watch others, you see how people lead. There are a few people that are born leaders, but I think most people learn it through modeled behavior. And I had the opportunity throughout my career to watch others, to learn from them, and to build my career off of that.
So let's talk a little bit about mentors, right? Because everybody, as they go down their journey, have mentors. So you're now becoming the mentor to so many. Who are the mentors, and at what points did you come across these folks?
So mentoring is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because I'm a big believer that mentors can't be assigned, they need to be found, because it's so much about that personal connection. And even today, I think also as you get older, you tend to think that you should move from being the person getting mentored to the person that is doing the mentoring. And I do both. I still have, as a CEO, I have a set of trusted advisors around me that really help guide me and help me with my decision making. And I give credit to several. One is a Stony Brook professor when I was at in the School of Engineering, Professor Ken Short, who I found out is still here today. When I went to MIT, I dedicated my thesis project to him because he really was such an inspiration to me and instilled in me a curiosity to continue to learn, and I'm very indebted to him. As I went through my career, I had several other mentors, and life lessons I learned from each of them, and all of them were men, by the way, and I think that that is a little bit from when I was growing up. Most of the role models were male, but when I think about, again, lessons to the females out there is, you don't have to go find yourself a female mentor. You can have anybody you want in the world to be your mentor if you establish that connection. And with mentorship, the importance, again, is for mentoring to work, it has to be about trust. You have to trust the person. You have to be willing to be vulnerable with the person. So, expose things that you're not comfortable with or concerns that you have about yourself. And very importantly, you have to be willing to listen to constructive feedback, which is not always the easiest thing in the world. But I still, again, surround myself with mentors. One taught me a very valuable lesson. Don't let the tail wag the dog, which is a phrase you may have heard. And I take that with me wherever I go, which is really don't let process, bureaucracy, whatever you might want to call it, get in the way of innovation or progress. The other mentor, and there's an interesting story with this, taught me about embracing change and don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. And if there's one thing I've learned is that, no matter what the change, it'll change again tomorrow. So if you don't like the situation you're not stuck. None of us are victims. We have the right to say lead, pass, follow, or lead, follow, pass on an opportunity. But, in this case, I was asked to step into a role. I am a results-driven executive, and I like owning things, and I like owning a P&L. And I had done that for many years at Reader's Digest, and my CEO at the time, Eric Schreier, had asked me to take on more of a matrix role across multiple parts of the organization. And I remember saying, yeah, Eric, I'm not really interested. And he's like, but Dawn, this is what we need you to do. And I'm like, not really comfortable. I really like owning things. He's like, yeah, but you're not really the decision maker in this. So I was like, okay. He's like, give it a try, because he goes, what I think this will teach you is you're going to step outside of your comfort zone and you will learn different skills, because you won't be in a position of direct authority. You will have to have a different skill set where you're practicing influence and negotiation. And those were things that were much more scary to me back in the day. And when I look back on my career and how I've arrived as a CEO, I think that training that I received by going kicking and screaming all the way into that role really is the thing that set me up to be a successful CEO, with the ability to negotiate and influence. Because as you go up in an organization, leadership is not about being the boss. That is exactly, anybody can be a boss, but to be a leader, you have to be able to inspire, and you have to be able to gain followership. And that negotiation and the ability to influence and bring along an organization is critical. And I learned that from, again, going kicking and screaming into a role I desperately did not want.
So let's talk about some of your roles. So you left MIT, and what was the first job out of MIT?
Oh, I went to Chase Manhattan Bank. After my MBA, I went and worked at Chase Manhattan Bank for a couple of years, credit card marketing. And then I worked at AT&T before that as an engineer for about 2 years, but really spent most of my career growing up at Reader's Digest, which you may think of as the little magazine, but really what it was a data, if you think analytics, it was ahead of its time in data analytics and ahead of its time in terms of performance-based marketing. So I really grew up with a marketing bent that was based on result-oriented data, and that was something that I think prepared me for my move to Nutrisystem.
Do you think that you always knew you wanted to be a CEO and so you took steps to get there, or do you think the steps that you were taking led you to the conclusion that one day you'd want to be a CEO?
I'm a big believer that when opportunity knocks, or if the door's a little open, give it a little push. And I would say, no, I did not grow up thinking I want to be a CEO. What I did grow up with, and when I was at Reader's Digest, is I was always looking for advancement and to continue to learn and for growth and responsibility. So when I was at Reader's Digest, I ended up being number 2 in the company as the president of international. And then interestingly enough, I'd worked for 4 different CEOs over a 5-year period, which gives you a front seat to really seeing different leadership styles and watching them and evaluating them. And after a couple of those CEOs left, they apparently mentioned me to the person that was doing the search for Nutrisystem, multiple different people, and I got tapped for that. But I don't think I knew that, but it's something that I don't know that I wanted that initially. It's a tremendous responsibility. Being number two is sort of nice because you're not ultimately accountable. But I think being CEO is better. But as a CEO, you're responsible for the livelihood of so many people. So it actually is something you have to take really seriously. And until I got into that role, I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. But it's been great.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that probably the two most important characteristics for a CEO is to be able to influence and negotiate, right? Because you can get your technical staff around you to give you the details.
Build the right team.
You build the right team. And another 2 points that you that you talk about is being direct and being very candid, right?
Yeah.
And talk about how important that is, both for institutional health and for leadership out there.
I think it's really important because, we're all so busy. You want to be respectful of people's time. And, I've been in situations where there's endless meetings and nothing happens. So one of the things we are is very direct in our meetings, where we want to start off meetings with, you'll frequently hear at Nutrisystem, the purpose of this meeting is ... And at the end of the meeting, we close with, okay, here's our next steps, here's what we're doing. And in too many organizations, you find that doesn't happen. So you'll find yourself having the next meeting being actually, it's like deja vu, it's a repeat of the meeting you just had. But one of the things that I think my style definitely is very candid and direct, but it's not about giving negative feedback to people. It's really about giving 360 feedback. And I'm a believer that in a meeting, you try to compliment, you be very positive, and then you give the feedback after. But people want to know where they stand. I would say people in my organization know where they stand, and that it's really important to set that path, and that direct feedback and vision from the top is critical in moving a company. And it's really critical right now as my company, Nutrisystem, is integrating with Tivity Health, that we really have very clear and direct communications on the vision in which we're going.
Right. So one of the things that accounts for a successful merger acquisition is culture. Right?
Yes.
The organizations have to have similar cultures, or else no matter what they do, it's not going to work. So talk about the importance of culture, the culture you had at Nutrisystem, and how you're sort of blending that and integrating that now.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. If the culture, the number one reason why mergers and acquisitions fail is because the cultures don't merge up. And if you don't define a culture, it will be defined for you, and often with unintended consequences. So when I came to Nutrisystem, I actually found a culture, and it's really hard to interview for culture. You can interview your potential boss, you can interview and say you like the company, you can do your research, but until you get in it, it's really hard to really understand what the culture of a company is like. And when I came to Nutrisystem, the company had been suffering 6 years of revenue declines and profit declines, and it was a culture that really accepted losing. It was like, okay, yeah, I guess diet season didn't work this year, we'll try again next year. And I'm like, wait, there's 10 more months left. What do you mean? Because January, February is the big time for weight loss. But so we had to put a very deliberate culture in place that focused on breaking down silos between the organization, that focused on, again, using data to make decisions and things along those lines. Now I find, as we're going through another transition of merging with a company that's equal to our size, so the size of Tivity Health just doubled with the acquisition of Nutrisystem, you find that even though the people across both organizations are very well intended, the way that we go about getting things done is not exactly the same. Doesn't mean one way is wrong and the other way is right, but if you just let it come together kind of in its own way, it's not going to work. You have to be very deliberate about setting that culture, and that's what I'm working on very hard right now, along with the CEO of Tivity Health.
Yeah, it's so critical. And the other thing that that I read some New York Times articles and some interviews that you've done talking about work-life balance and talking about freaking people out with 2 a.m. emails and everything else. So talk about that work-life balance as well, because I think that's something that, particularly in today's day and age, it's a very, very big challenge and struggle.
Yeah, it's hard. work-life balance is hard, and I was fortunate because my husband is an electrical engineer, and he was actually very active with me in raising our kids. So we were able to have a situation where the kids did have a lot of parental, either my husband or me around them, and at all times. But that work-life balance is really hard, no matter if you're a male or a female. And I think what it comes down to actually is it's a little elusive. Work-life balance is a little bit of an elusive concept, but flexibility shouldn't be. And I think as I've gone through my career, the ability to have some flexibility of, when do I need, so for example, even though I had a very powerful job at Reader's Digest, I always raised my hand to be the class mom for my kids' parties. Reason number one was because I could then make sure the party was scheduled around when I could make it.
Great point.
Yep.
Great point.
And reason number two is I could just efficiently get it done. So, that was my reason for doing it, though, was so I could participate, and I knew if I owned it, I could participate around my schedule, and I could work my schedule to that. But I do think that, it does come down to flexibility. So to your point earlier, I did send emails out when I had my children. I would leave work, get home at 6:30, and then I taught my kids at a very early age to stay up late. Probably not the best parenting on that front, but my kids were like night owls. So I would hang out with them, and then when they would go to sleep around 10:30, sometimes 11, I would start working again. So I'd power up my laptop and I worked till like 2 in the morning. And often as I'm working, I would send emails to my people that worked for me and asking them questions, asking them for a response. And of course I didn't expect them to get back to me at 3 in the morning. But what I found like a couple of weeks later is some guy, and this is where having open, candid conversations is really helpful. He said, Dawn, you keep sending us emails, please, do you expect us to respond? And I'm like, oh no. And they're like, well, can you just, it's freaking us out. Can you send them in the morning? And I was like, oh no. And I said, let me explain to you, this is my version of work-life balance. So I'm going to send them at 1 in the morning. For me to save them in draft and then do it later is not efficient for me, but please don't feel that you have to get back. But everybody has to come to their own way of managing, and that for that point in time in my career was my way of doing it. But again, you have to realize sometimes you're doing something that has a different connotation than what you think. Another interesting example from Reader's Digest, and this comes to culture, is we had created signs for our whole organization talking about the mission and the vision and our and our values and principles, and translated them into 26 different languages. Again, I was running all of international, told everybody to post it up on the walls of the company, and as I went to visit the world, everybody's signs were up, except in the Czech Republic. So I said to my managing director, Lubash, I'm like, Lubash, why aren't you, where are the signs? And he's like, Dawn, he goes, what you don't realize as an American is that, we just received we just became a democracy. We just moved away from communism, and in the communist society, it's very prevalent to be told to put posters up all over the place, and we're not comfortable with that in our culture. So that was a defining moment for me, because I thought, okay, you really have to understand, people are the same basically all around the world, but you have to be respectful and really understand different things that motivate them or that causes them discomfort. And that lesson to me really has stuck with me ever since.
So one of the things that I've learned in different parts of my career is it can be very lonely at the top. It can just feel that way, and that the best antidote to that is to surround yourself with a great team.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Trusted folks, right? Mm-hmm. So talk about that. Talk about how important it is to have a team atmosphere, teamwork, and trusted people around you.
Yeah, I think you need to surround yourself with people that are accountable or highly engaged, that have passion for what you do. And when I came to Nutrisystem, and I inherited a team that I since had changed out a lot, kept about half the people, and immediately got rid of some of the others. The people I got rid of were the people that said, it was 7 months since the CEO transition had been announced, and when I got there, they're like, yeah, we're kind of checking you out, going to see what you want to do, and then we'll decide if we're on the bus or not. I'm like, really? I'm like, so you're telling me that in the last 7 months, when the CEO was sort of on the out, you didn't step up to lead, you didn't do any of that, you're just waiting to see as the company's falling apart. And basically that was the answer. So I said, well, you don't have to wait and see for long, because you're out. You know, because you really need people in a company that care and that have passion. And so, you know, I took the people in the company that were passionate, that were willing to work hard, that were willing to roll up their sleeves. And then I brought in a CMO because I came from a marketing background, and I knew that if I didn't have a strong chief marketing officer that was trained similarly to me, that I would over-engage in that area. And as a CEO, I couldn't spend my time there, even though that was where I would naturally gravitate. So brought in a rock star CMO, recruited back a CFO, hired a great PR person who's in the room tonight, Robin, thank you very much. And so began our journey, and we kept a couple of people in the organization as well. So it was really one of my experiences when I worked for 4 different CEOs in 5 years was watching how other CEOs built their team. And I was very cognizant not to build an us versus them culture. You can't come in, clean out a team, and then bring in your own team. It really creates discomfort and a lack of trust within the organization. So my goal really was to take the best in the company, keep them, and then, you know, bring in new blood to surround it and to motivate and engage the company to grow. But you're only as successful as your team, because as one person, you can't do it all. And it is lonely at the top. So if you have a team of colleagues that really you work with together as a team, and I do have a trusted advisor that I rely on, and he, Brad Thomas, he had helped me in terms of figuring out how to get the team in place and the 90-day accountabilities, and really has been a trusted advisor ever since that I bounce almost all major decisions off of. It's important to have that support group around you as a CEO.
Yeah, so talk about, so you go to the Nutrisystem, and you mentioned it before, they were lagging over years, right?
Yeah.
And as a public company, I know you get that daily blink of the stock every day to remind you.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's an addiction.
It's an addiction. But in in just a very short period of time, you were able to turn it around and get that revenue growing, which is remarkable. So that's your asset, right? Your entrepreneurial spirit, your ability to influence, your ability to motivate. Talk about that. Talk about what that whole process is and how hard it is to get that whole ship moving in a different direction.
Yeah, we put in place a 4-point strategy, and culture was the underpinning of it all. But you know, the first thing we did is the company had underinvested. So we really went through a typical turnaround. Turnaround 101 is go look for the costs, because you can get costs more easily than revenue if you don't have the right strategy in place. So we did an overhaul across the whole cost structure, but then instead of letting it fall all to the bottom line for the street, we ended up reinvesting quite a bit of it into technology, because we were an e-commerce company but hadn't really invested in e-commerce. As a matter of fact, when I got to my little e-commerce company, Nutrisystem, I found out the whole e-commerce team had left about 1.5 years earlier. There might be part of the problem. So we hired in a marketing team. The company also had done innovation around food. So, we are a weight loss company, and, the means to weight loss for us is food delivery. And the prior management team had done a lot of work around food development and done a fantastic job. But they got very enamored with the food, and they started marketing themselves as a gourmet food company. How many of you, if you put something in the microwave and it comes out 2 minutes later, would classify that as gourmet food? Anybody? No. So we were marketing our product as gourmet food, and the messaging had walked away from weight loss, which really was the key for the business people in the room. That was the unique selling proposition and the main benefit. So we got the messaging right, and we focused on product innovation and really did some clinical studies to show that the program really worked. And then we started talking about weight loss, and a highly regulated industry, weight loss, so you can't say anything about losing weight or how many pounds you'll lose unless you have clinical studies against it. So the turnaround really was about the cost focus, and then to get the initial bottom line going, and then to focus on innovation and marketing, and that really drove it. And then, looking at opportunities, so really diversifying channels, so we entered into retail and did a couple of other things. So it was pretty textbook. We also had a brand that needed dusting off, so Nutrisystem was a brand that many people had heard of, but it wasn't really in the consideration set. So I remember before I got there, Bloomberg was the mayor of New York, and he was thinking about imposing some tax on drinks, on sodas. And they asked the CEO of Weight Watchers at the time and the CEO of Jenny Craig, what they thought about this. And it was before I was at Nutrisystem, but we weren't asked. Nobody was asking us what we thought, yet we were the #2 brand in the country for weight loss. So I realized we needed to get our brand, dust off the brand a little bit. Robin came on the scene, and I quickly told her, your job is to make sure anytime Weight Watchers is mentioned that we're mentioned. And then once that was happening on a regular basis, I said, okay, now let's drop the Weight Watchers and make sure we just get mentioned. And it was a very deliberate strategy. And and then all of a sudden we were back in the vernacular, back in the common. People were talking about us. No shortage to a turnaround than actually delivering what you say you're going to do. And we just had a good strategy and a lot of hard work by the team.
Yeah, turnarounds are particularly tough, and it's really important to keep the team motivated in that setting, right?
Celebrate
Because
the small wins.
Celebrate all of the, exactly right. And it doesn't move in a straight line, right? So people want it to zoom, and you got to have a lot of patience, and careers don't move in straight lines. So talk about that. Talk about the ups and the downs and sort of where that's helped you, because sometimes you learn more on the downs than you do on the ups.
So one of the things I like to tell, especially when I talk to people that are near graduating from school, is that your career is not a straight line. And I think there's a tremendous, having kids of college age myself, I think there's tremendous pressure on the graduating classes to know exactly what they want to do when they graduate. Yet if you, how many of you are students in the room? A lot of you. How many of you know what you want to do when you graduate? A lot less. That's okay. No, I think that's, the people raising their hand. Yeah. And I would say that's okay. I mean, I think that's actually pretty terrific, because you're not supposed to know exactly what you want to do. And if you're so married to it, you won't be open to other opportunities. So when I graduated college, as you heard earlier, I was an electrical engineer, and that was not my path, but it was my way of learning how to think. And then I decided I liked marketing, and I went back to business school, changed my career. I worked at a phone company, I worked at a bank, I spent a lifetime at Reader's Digest, and only stayed that long because every time I was about to leave, I got an interesting new opportunity, and then ended up at Nutrisystem, and now I'm part of another company that 6 months ago I would tell you I never had any intent of selling the company, but it was right for the shareholders. So I really encourage people to not be so wedded to getting from point A to B, because it's never going to be that straight line. The real lesson to success is, as you said, is to learn from every experience. So if you have a job that you don't like, leave it. Nobody's an indentured servant, but make sure you learn during your time there. And I tell my daughter, who actually is a junior in college, and who seems to be, what she's doing very well is ruling out what she doesn't want to do. So every intern she has, it's like, nope, that's not for me, that's not for me. But that's good. That's really important to know, importantly, not only to know what you want to do, but also what you don't want to do. And so I think that straight path, it's never a straight path for anybody. And for people that are the most successful, it's probably anything but. So you talk about experiences of ups and downs. And we all have opportunities in our career where we're soaring high. I think we all have opportunities when you get a temporary setback. And it could be a project that doesn't work well. And I always say fail fast, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial mode. You're not going to get everything right. Very few things, startups actually work. But the key is to know when to stop putting good money after bad. But in my situation, I was in a role, in a leadership role at Reader's Digest, and had been delivering the best results ever, and there was a leadership change, and all of a sudden I found myself working for somebody that had been inserted between me and the CEO. And I did not like that at all. And I remember going home and talking to my husband about it and saying, I don't think this is something I want to do anymore. And we decided, there's this phrase I like to use, which is lead. Sometimes you're going to be leading, sometimes you're going to be following, and sometimes you're going to be offered an opportunity that you don't want, and it's okay to pass. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say it's not right for me. And I went into my CEO at the time, and I told her, I said, listen, I know the company's going through a hard time right now. I want to tell you I don't want this role that I'm in. I'm not going to stay. I'm going to leave. But I'm going to leave after the company goes through. We were going through a bankruptcy at the time, actually. I said, I'm going to leave after because I don't want it to reflect badly that somebody on the leadership team is leaving. And she's like, well, if you think this is going to get me to change my mind, I really feel that I need this person in the role. I said, no. I said, actually, it's fine. I am telling you, though, I'm leaving. and I'm okay with it. And you really have to be, and if you're going to go pull that card, you have to make sure you're really okay with it. And I really intended to be gone within the next couple of weeks. So I go back to my office, and literally less than an hour later, I got a call from her, and she's like, hey, can we have breakfast tomorrow? I'm like, okay, sure. And there was no bad blood or anything. I'm like, sure, I'll have breakfast with you. And I went to breakfast with her, and she's like, okay, I understand you don't want to be in this role. I recognize, but I don't want you to leave. Will you consider becoming president of Europe? And I was like, what? So, and here's like, I barely had been out of the country. I think I had to go get a passport. So I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And then she's like, well, do you want to move to London? And I'm like, no, my kids are in high school. I'm not going to do that. I go, I'll just do it from New York. And she's like, okay. And so that was the start of something that wasn't working for me, and that I was viewing as like a probably one of the most low points of my career was when that happened. And it turned into, by my saying not right for me, and being honest about it, it turned into probably the most incredible period of growth and development for me as a professional and as a person, because I found that when I started running Europe and then ultimately international, I really just got to see the world. My family got to see the world, and I just learned so much about people. And again, you know, I felt that I was growing personally, which generally doesn't happen to that level in your 40s. And then the professional experience I got from managing 26 different countries was phenomenal. So the lesson goes back to what we said earlier, is embrace change, because sometimes change happens and you might not like it, but other doors open that could be pretty amazing. And if you don't like the door that opens, you can always close it and wait for another door to open. We're never trapped.
Yeah, that's what I love so much about business, is how quickly things can change.
Right.
I mean, like you said, you're in your kitchen, you got a phone call from someone you didn't know, and all of a sudden...
You're married.
Yeah, that's it. You're married. Just administratively, there are some question cards that are being passed around. If you guys have some questions, jot them down on there, pass them to the end, because in a few minutes I'm going to turn to your questions. So let's talk about, you know, Dawn, the non-business person. Now, you know, what do you do? What do you do to help keep yourself sane? What do you do to help keep yourself trained and sharp professionally on a personal level? You know, how does that work? Because people want to know, this woman's up from, you know, 7 in the morning till 2 a.m. doing emails. But where during that day do you find Dawn time there?
Yeah, so I'm not one that reads all the latest books that come out on business. As a matter of fact, I think I've read 2 in my entire life. I am a consumer of snippets of information, so I do, you know, wake up. My morning regimen is I wake up, I listen to the news, make sure, you know, that, you know.
The world's still here.
Yeah, the world's still here. Should I be going to work or should I not be? You know, what's going on? So I'm a big believer in just, you know, getting that, but I'm more an aggregator of content. And, you know, I look to my team to let me know whatever's going on in the industry, so I get really quick reads, and then, you know, glance through the national and the world news to know what's happening. Again, you know, and I'll read leadership insights, but it has to be in, you know, short form. And maybe that comes from my Reader's Digest experience where everything was condensed. But, you know, that is part of my life. But I think I get my balance or my sanity from my family. And, you know, I was one of those people that, even though I had a very intense career, I'm a believer that if you don't love what you're doing, don't do it. And if you begin not to like it, change it. And so I was always fortunate that I loved what I did, no matter what job, you know, and when I didn't like it, I did change it. But for the majority of my life, I loved what I was doing. But I viewed my number one job in life was being a mom. And it was, you know, important to me that I raised my kids right. And I'm proud to say I have 2 highly functioning adults. My number one job was being a mom, and I always joke to people that, yeah, I'm really fortunate. I have this great hobby where I'm like the president of International, or I'm the CEO of Nutrisystem. Great hobby to have. It's really good. But, you know, my priority was always around my family, and because I don't require much sleep, it's kind of my little secret weapon that, you know, I can get by with 3 or 4 hours. So I was able to do both. And it's fun, but, you know, the thing that I do to relax is really spend time with my family. I love to travel, so travel the world when I can, get a little exercise in. And, you know, the books I'm not reading complex business books. I like to read trash novels, you know, like the romance novels, because it's downtime, because you have to escape, and sometimes you just need to, you know, just disappear and escape. So on a plane, you know, I'm either doing work or I'm just like reading something fun.
So the old saying, if I knew then what I know now, right? So let's go back to 25-year-old Dawn, and if 25-year-old Dawn was sitting in this seat, what would you tell her, knowing now what you know?
I'd say chill, girl. Because I was a worrier, and I would still say I am a worrier. But again, I've got comfort knowing that things. Again, that embracing change, not to be so afraid of the unknown, and to experience, take those experiences. I would say I was a very cautious 25-year-old, and there's so much more in life to experience. And I would say that as I've gotten older, I've gotten less cautious, and or more open to experiencing new things. And when I look at my, I look at my daughter, and I would say if I was looking back at my 25-year-old self, I would say be her. Because this is, she doesn't have it all figured out, but she doesn't worry about it. She does the hard work to get her grades. She is all about the experience, so she will get up and go on a road trip and go see the world, or go drive across the country with some friends, and just really embraces life in every moment. And the other thing that she's doing that I didn't do at that age was give back. And it's one of the things that impresses me most about the generation of 20-somethings out there in the room is their commitment to give back. And many young students I find are actually doing that when that wasn't even on my mind when I was 25. But really important to learn, especially as we look at the millennial audience, and some positive things said about millennials and Gen Zs, and quite a bit of negative things said. And I would say that when I look at them, I see a robust workforce, people that are super efficient, so they're not going to want to work 24/7 like people like me did. They really do embrace the concept of work-life balance, but they're willing to work hard and efficient to get there. And they're more about the experience than the material, which I think is really important, and they are committed to give back. So if I had to look at my 25-year-old self then, I would fast forward to my daughter today.
That's great advice. So let's just talk a little bit about the obesity epidemic that goes on today, Nutrisystem. So Nutrisystem, I've had family members that have used it with great success. I probably should use it, but I like steak and wine too much, so I'm just not gonna.
South Beach, we have South Beach for you. You can have steak and wine on South Beach.
That's right. But talk about that. So you came into the company, you had to change the messaging, you had to change it, but it's a really serious issue that it's seeking to help. But talk about that.
Yeah, so 2/3 of the population are obese or overweight, and it's the number one, 250 billion in healthcare costs related to obesity-related issues, and that's because it's associated with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So really important. But the exciting thing, and why I love coming to work every day, is because I know we're making a difference in people's lives. And when you hear the stories of our success stories come into the office and tell us their stories. So Morgan, who is a single mom who was an Army vet, suffered depression after she got out of the Army and gained a lot of weight. And when she tells her story of how she lost weight on Nutrisystem and how it transformed her lives, it's something that, the whole company listens to her story. She's sitting on a stool similar to this, and she's telling such an emotional story, and she's crying, and we're crying, and it really just says to you how you really can transform people's lives, and it's one person at a time, but it makes even the rough days of coming to work great, because you know that you're making a difference. So I think that's part of what motivates me, but it is hard. So I do believe structured programs like Nutrisystem or South Beach Diet are some of the best ways to lose weight and get in shape. And losing just 200-pound person losing 14 pounds, 7% of their body weight can reduce their chance of type 2 diabetes by 60%. And so really small bite-sized changes can make huge differences in your health. And now increasingly it's changed more from just weight loss to health and wellness. And I think that's where the combination of our being part of Tivity Health is so exciting, because they have the fitness component, we have the weight loss component. We're all about going directly to the consumer. They have relationships with the health plans. So there's a lot that we can do together to really expand the mission of helping to get America more healthy.
Right, so I think most people are familiar with Nutrisystem, not a lot with Tivity.
Right.
So talk about Tivity a little bit. What is their mission? What are they doing?
So they're they're morphing in their strategy, but their strategy was about fitness and actually helping the aging population stay fit through silver sneakers and really addressing some of the issues that seniors face with social isolation and things along those lines. And people that are obese or overweight also suffer a lot of those issues, as do any generation. The social isolation issue is really an important one, but they were more about the calories out, which was the fitness, and they really work through the health plans or through gym networks. We operate in an entirely different way, and the vision was that if you could bring together the calories in, which is nutrition, and the calories out, which is fitness, and combine it into a more holistic solution, it would lead to more healthier outcomes.
That's great. So it sounds like a great
Yeah, it's
combination there.
It is.
It really
It's
does.
the next chapter is very exciting, I think, for the combined company.
Yeah, so that's what I want, my next question. So the next 5 years, what do you see in the industry? What do you see you guys focused on? How do you see that?
So I think increasingly it's becoming more about personalization and personalized nutrition. So one of the things that I'm very proud of that we developed at Nutrisystem was this product called DNA Body Blueprint, which, like an Ancestry or Ancestry or 23andMe, where you take a swab, you don't get back your genealogy, but you get back your nutritional profile. So probably many of us think we should cut down on the carbs, that carbs are not good. But for some of us, that's very true, but it really is tied to your own unique DNA coding in terms of whether you should avoid carbs or not, or what type of exercise. Zumba may be best for you, but yoga may be better for me, or spin. And there's a ton of different information about your eating behaviors, about your metabolism, about your nutrition, what should be your macronutrient profile, and this report tells us that, and then we're developing unique targeted programs. So I believe the future is about personalized nutrition. I believe it's moving the conversation from just weight loss and weight management to overall health and wellness. If you think about how the weight loss industry has changed over the last 10 years, it's no longer about a vanity play. You can't market that way. You can't talk about vanity when it comes to weight loss. Now, when you peel back the onion a little bit, a lot of it still is about the physical, but it's also about the emotional and the health just as importantly. So the messaging is really morphed to more around overall health and wellness.
Yeah, that's great. So we're going to turn to some questions from the audience. We'll try and get through as many as we can. It's incredibly warm up here, so we'll get through these.
Yeah.
Crazy warm. First question is from Ed Fabian. Where are you at, Ed? Ed's right over there. That's a great question. So
Yeah.
as you said, Nutrisystem was struggling when you took over. Did you go looking for them, knowing you could turn them around? Or did they come looking for you?
They came looking for me. And I would say that they were looking, and it took them 7 months to find somebody, because I think they were looking for somebody that had CEO experience initially, and they didn't find the right person. And then they said, okay, what we really need is somebody that has turnaround experience and that has this direct-to-consumer experience. And again, this is where, an important lesson in life is never burn bridges. So as I shared earlier, I worked for 4 different CEOs over a 5-year period. So 5 years later, 3 of them were out there in the market. 1 was still at Nutrisystem. And 2 of them were asked by a search firm, do you know anybody that you think could turn this around? And 2 independent CEOs that I worked for had pointed to me. So I think that's how I got tapped. And it, again, came down to, working hard, doing what I said I was going to do at Reader's Digest, and then maintaining the relationships when people left.
Yeah, so an important point, I think, from my perspective, having worked with so many great CEOs, is the best way to get to the next position is to stay totally focused on your current position and not have one eye on the next position. What is your thoughts about that? I mean, you have to have ambition to grow,
Right.
but you have to prove that you can do the job that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I think success breeds success, so I would agree with that. I think networking in this day and age is so important, and because it's not just, there are so many smart people out there, it's about, it is unfortunately or fortunately about connections. So not to get the job, but to get noticed. So as you're applying for jobs, even as entry-level jobs, there's a stack of resumes yay big, and how do you get yours from the middle to the top? That's not going to get you the job, but it will get you noticed. So again, taking advantage of networking opportunities, I think, is critical. But yeah, I think the path to success is doing what you say you're going to do and doing it well, and then people will notice.
I think that's so critical. Next question is from Joanne Track. Joanne, where are you? Thank you for your comment. Her question is, what do you enjoy most about your position and role as a CEO? And I'm going to add to that and say, and what do you enjoy least about your role and position as a CEO as well?
So what I enjoyed the most, which surprised me, I mean, I enjoy the team aspect of it, and obviously when you're succeeding, it's incredibly exciting, and to know that you're going to be able to reward the entire company for their efforts. One of the things that I enjoy more than I ever expected I would when I moved into this role is the interaction with the street and with the media and the community. That was something that I hadn't done previously, and it's something that I've really liked to do, is take my message on the road a little bit. The things I enjoy the least are what you would expect, is in situations when you have to let people go, and also when you have to cut costs and you can't do all that you want, because it comes down to constant prioritization. And if it was an endless, stream of money coming in, you could do everything you want, but you really do have to prioritize and make tough decisions around what you're going to fund and not fund. And then when you have to decide not to fund something, that's really hard. Or when you have to, fortunately at Nutrisystem, we never had to go through, any round of layoffs or anything, but because we were growing. But when I was at Reader's Digest, we had to do that a couple of times. And I think I think the hardest thing to do in life is to fire somebody, whether it's for cause or whether it's just the company's downsizing, because you're really messing with somebody's life. But I also think a big thing for success is establishing a performance-based culture, and that's something I really took pride in at Nutrisystem, was really rewarding people for their performance, and I think that really helps as well.
Yeah, and Joanne's other question centers around what have you found to be the benefits and the challenges of being a female CEO? Has there been anything that you found to be a benefit and a challenge as that?
Well, it was interesting because when I came to Nutrisystem, I was the first female CEO at Nutrisystem, and I think the first public company female CEO, and in weight loss. And I think people thought, wow, she's a female, she's had her weight loss struggles, like she knows exactly what to do. And I would say that's a really easy trap to fall into, to think that you're a focus group, an expert on the mass community or the mass audience that's out there. And I think sometimes as we get more, as leaders, and we think we know more about our industry, we tend to think we know what the consumer wants without actually researching and finding out what the consumer wants. So, one of the things that I always try to do is make sure that we have the customer at the table. It's a Jeff Bezos quote, but that, we're always looking at the consumer, and that, I don't think I'm the expert on female weight loss just because I've been on a diet or two. I think that's a very dangerous trap to fall into. But, as I alluded to earlier, I really never thought about myself as a female CEO. I always try to think of myself as a CEO, because I don't want to just be playing with 6% of the population. I want to be part of the 100%.
That's a great point. Next question from Brian Cohen. Brian, I didn't see you come in, Brian. There's Brian. Brian says, how did you establish your credibility as a leader before you were actually given a leadership role?
Worked hard, delivered results. So it's just do your job, do it well.
Right, and that started at Stony Brook. Do well, get good grades. Yep. Everything's a building block at that point,
I would agree.
Everything's a building block.
And raise your hand, because I think, I think sometimes what happens is, and this I would say is different for the genders. So I've noticed a difference between men and women with this. And, if there's an opportunity, I find that as a female, and I wouldn't say guilty of this because it's not guilty or not guilty, but I've been in this position where earlier in my career, if there was an opportunity, I would sit down, I'd consider it. My mom was a big, we had the yellow pad, and we'd write down the pros and the cons, and then we'd analyze it. That's how I made my decisions about which schools to go to and all that. But I think when you get asked for an opportunity in the business world, a lot of times the females are really analyzing it, and it's like, well, I think I can do 6 of these things, but these other 2 things I'm not so sure about. And, will I be successful? Will I not be successful? And meanwhile, what I find is that the males in the room are not thinking about it. And this is a generalization, guys, but but I applaud you for it if you do this. Not really worried about it. Not worried about the details of how it's going to get done. It's like opportunity for advancement. I'm going to take it. I'll figure it out as I go. And meanwhile, the females are like, yeah, I can do it. And meanwhile, now the position's filled. So I encourage, all the females out there to believe in yourself. And, if there's an opportunity, don't overanalyze it because nobody's a perfect fit. I wasn't a perfect fit for Nutrisystem. I wasn't, nobody's a perfect fit. But, I was a pretty good fit and I was able to deliver really good results. So, believe in yourself and take a chance on yourself because if you've had a history of being successful, odds are that your next role you will be successful in.
I think that's a great piece of advice. I think if people are sitting there thinking about it, a great thing to do is just to physically raise your hand. Absolutely. Great
Yep.
piece of advice. It really is. Next question is from Anonymous. What programs did you find were most successful in helping to build the Nutrisystem culture?
I think communication. You can never over communicate. So I think we when I came to Nutrisystem, we did an employee survey, which served as the benchmark and identified what the issues in the company were, which were silos and lack of accountability. People really weren't sure. If you asked who was responsible, there'd be a lot of this going on. And so I think really communicating your expectations from the top, making sure that there are corporate goals and that they cascade down. And then I would say one of the most successful things I did was establish a performance-based culture because, previously at Nutrisystem, if you were a product manager, you would get a bonus, let's say 10% of your salary would be the bonus. And all product managers, if the numbers were hit, would get 10% of their bonus. 10%, bonus equivalent to 10% of their salary. And I said, no, that's not how I want to do it. I want to do performance-based, and it's still a zero-sum game. You only have so many dollars to give out. But I said, I'm going to give some people, 50%. I'm going to give some people 150%, and some people 200%. So I'm really going to differentiate based on performance. It shocked the system for the first year, but the good news is we actually delivered our results, so we had a bonus to give out. Right. But when people realize you're going to get rewarded for performance, it's really interesting because what you find then is the people that don't want to work that hard, self-select out, which is always nicer to have somebody self-select out than to have to let somebody go. And it really just kept elevating the culture and the caliber of the company.
Yeah,
that was one of the programs we put in place.
That's great, and I think that's right. Culture is all about communication.
Yeah.
In my mind, culture is all about communication.
Absolutely.
Next one also is anonymous, but it says how important is training and staff development. So training is a critical part of this. Mm-hmm. And what's your philosophy? How do you guys handle training for your and staff development?
So we have an onboarding process. So when somebody comes in, we definitely go through an onboarding process. We do believe that our lifeline is the consumer. So we have a contact center in our building, and we make sure that every person that comes into the company and every marketing person spends a lot of time just listening to customer calls and feedback. And then, of course, there's a lot, in the e-commerce world, there's a lot of conferences out there. So we encourage people to go out and, learn through conferences and participate. We don't believe in a culture where, you have to be locked in. We believe getting out there, talking and, taking part in business events is really critical.
Right, so we're good for a few more?
Sure.
Great, so Maria Fry. I think I saw Maria. Is Maria still here? But the question is, what is the best piece of advice anyone ever gave you?
It was my mom. It was be the best you can be. Do your personal best.
And what do you think the best piece of advice you've given somebody is?
Do your personal best.
Well, Mom would be proud.
Yeah, she would be.
Another question is, how do you encourage creative thinking within your organization? Creativity is important. How do you encourage it?
Yeah, I think we have a culture. So it's interesting as we look at the different cultures of Tivity Health and Nutrisystem. Ours is a culture of active debate. But it's also a culture where, so we get in a room and everybody is equal for the initial conversation. And I think it's an exercise in listening and letting people talk about what they think the answers and the creativity should be. And as long as it's steeped in fact. And then what we do is after that, we'll say, okay, what are we going to do? We'll make a decision and we'll move on that. But I do think that, we encourage debate within the company and active debate, so different points of view are heard. And then there comes the time when you're just like, okay, this is what we're going to do. But that's one of the things I think we do to encourage the creativity. And then the other thing I did at Reader's Digest, which was interesting, and I haven't not done it at Nutrisystem, and I probably should have, is have thinking days. Because I think too often, like your day-to-day, you don't have time to think on your day-to-day. So, I would encourage people, once a quarter to take a thinking day, go walk a bookstore, go to the beach, go do something where you can decompress and you really just think more strategically about the business. At Nutrisystem, we are pretty deliberate about having, different strategic days that are set aside just for thinking about go-forward strategy. But I think those thinking days when you can be by yourself and just, really process and think creatively help.
Yeah, I always say sometimes my most creative thoughts come in the shower. I don't know
Yeah,
why,
it's
they
true.
they just come in the shower.
Or in the car,
Yeah, it's crazy. Next question is about corporate and social responsibility programs within
Yeah.
the company. So what's Nutrisystem's position on that? Do you integrate them? How do you incorporate that?
Yeah, so this is something actually I'm really proud of as becoming a new member of the Tivity Health family, is because they have what they call a double bottom line, and a lot of what they do goes back to corporate give back through Healthy Villages, which is a charity that they sponsor. At Nutrisystem, I wanted to make sure that any of our philanthropic efforts tied directly back to the challenge at hand, which was addressing societal weight loss issues. So I chose for the company to become, and the company had a relationship, and we elevated it with the American Diabetes Association and with the American Heart Association. And I think those tied very nicely to what the weight loss issues. But one of the things we've done more recently is really focus on direct community give back. And these are things that really bring a company together. When somebody in the company has a passion point or a give back, we've done some stuff dealing with substance abuse where, we'll just do some simple things like, pack, carrying bags for people, but that really brings I think social and corporate responsibility actually are some of the best things you can do for teamwork, because it really brings a company together and individuals.
Right, so guiding values. Okay, so there's certainly business principles, but there's
Yep.
got to be guiding values, and certainly a public company in today's day and age has to have guiding values. Talk about the importance of that, and where does that come? Does it come from the board? Does it come from you? How does that all work for the guiding values of a company?
I have found that it comes from both of those places. So I do think that we set the strategy. We always, having a culture of respect is really important. Our culture is one, again, of being able to be candid and direct and know that it's with the intent of getting to a solution. So our facts-based culture, I would say, are some of our guiding principles of being focused, accountable, customer-centric, team-oriented, and solution-based. But I think another guiding principle, and I think it's so important for corporate America today because a lot of companies are failing miserably at it, is ethics. And ethics always matter. And one of the things I like to tell when I'm talk about speaking at universities is to really develop your critical memory muscle when it comes to ethics, because right now the decisions are pretty black and white that you'll face. It's easy to know right from wrong, and it's easy to know what the right decision is versus the wrong one. But as you go further in your careers and you're faced with decisions that you are thinking, oh, seems a little gray, or if you're second guessing, well, should I do this or shouldn't I do this? The odds are you probably shouldn't do it. And I just think you see so many fallen CEOs, fallen executives, companies that topple because of just bad ethical decision making. And I just think as corporate America, we need to be vigilant about it. But I think it starts early on with making the easy choices now. No, just do what's right. But I think companies are falling short.
Yeah, so I think two final questions. One is a relationship with the board, right? So you have, especially in a public company, you have your customers that
Yep.
you have your staff, and then you have your board,
And you have the
right?
stockholders, and a
Your
lot of
whole
different
ecosystem,
constituents.
there's a
Yep.
lot there. So talk about a relationship between a CEO and a board. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I
to
think, and
folks.
I sit in both worlds, because I am a CEO and I have a board of directors, and then also I am on boards where I work with CEOs. And before I came out here today, I actually had lunch with the CEO of Hain Celestial, which is a board I'm on. And I'm a big believer, and fortunately, the Nutrisystem board was terrific, and very, very supportive, but they help set the strategy of the company. But good boards let the management team lead. And what I view my board, though, is a group of really smart people that I should tap into. I shouldn't avoid talking to the board. You develop a board that has a skill set that is very different, different functional areas of expertise, and then I find that they're a great resource to tap into to get insights from and to use the board effectively. It's not so much the quarterly board meeting where I get the value from my board, it's those off-cycle meetings when I'm calling them on the phone and talking to them. And same thing, my experience now at Tivity Health, where I am a member of their board, and just getting to know this new board of directors is, they're very engaged and willing to help. But it's a fine line, and it's a fine line of the CEO manages the company, and the board is there as a strategic to help set the strategy. But there are some boards that lean in too much, and I've been fortunate with the boards that I'm on where that hasn't really happened.
Yeah, I find that most successful CEOs have had a very good relationship with
It's important, yeah.
And it's very important and time consuming. The last question is, what is your definition of success, and do you think you've been successful?
Okay, I would say if you look at the facts, you'd say, yeah, I've probably been pretty successful. But it's how do you measure success? And I think I measure success in happiness. And and I look at my life as distinct components. So there's my family, there's my friends, and there's my work. And for me, happiness, which is success, is having 2 out of 3 always working well at any given time. And because, life is not perfect, so it's kind of sometimes, the family thing will be perfect, work might not be. Sometimes it's, so I always try, if I'm operating at 66% in those 3 things, 2 out of 3 are going pretty well, I feel like I'm being pretty successful.
Yep, it's the old Meatloaf song, 2
Right.
out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah.
So folks, let's give our guest, Dawn Zier, a rousing round of applause for such a wonderful and insightful evening. Really just a terrific opportunity for the students here. I'd like to thank especially our dean and our provost for hosting us. This has been a terrific thing.
Thank you.
Bruce and the team for putting this together. And mostly for the students, really, you have to understand that this has been such a unique opportunity. You may not remember a lot of what happened at Stony Brook, but you will remember 25 years from now the fact that you met Dawn, what a dynamic leader she is, and the pearls of wisdom she imparted on you. Trust me, you will remember this night. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We
Thank you,
appreciate
everybody,
it.
for attending.